And here we are a short time later. I think maybe 5 days, something like that, 5 days. It's definitely cured enough to do the next stages here. I could have probably done this even a couple of days ago when the concrete was still a little bit softer, a little bit greener. If there's any shaping or grinding or sanding of any appreciable degree that you're going to do, it probably would be a good idea to get to it while it's a little bit greener, because it's just softer and weaker and easier to work with. And let me give you an example here. So I think I have a little bit of a left to right bounce there. And so I'm going to want to take down a little bit here. I actually have a styrofoam plug in here because there's a hole through this planter. So when I remove that, it might be okay as is. But just to show you how it would work. Oh, I've got a lump here in the bottom. It's not going to sit flat. Like if I wanted this to sit on concrete instead of in the grass or in the garden, it might rock back and forth. And with a big heavy planter, you don't want it rocking back and forth. So I definitely want this to be perfectly flat. Let's talk about ways that you could accomplish this. There's a couple of different tools that you could go to, and it kind of depends how green this concrete is. Like at this point, this stuff's pretty solid. Like, I mean, it's basically like a sidewalk. Any of the lighter duty methods, like if this was still green, like let's say 24 hours after I made this thing, I came out and I noticed, oh, it's a little high there. Even just with like a dull implement like this, I could probably scratch down that layer to a perfect level because it's so weak. You can easily do that. In this case, it's not going to work. Like you can't go re-level your sidewalk out front just by scraping it a little bit. So you're gonna have to use something maybe like this. This is a grinding stone. Probably wouldn't be my choice for this, but if it's what you had, you probably could do this. Just do like a circular motion and you're gonna wear that down. But let's talk about some other things here. A little bit of sandpaper. Anywhere between 80 and 200 grit is probably going to be a suitable number to scratch this down. Again, you probably want to go with a swirling motion here as opposed to a back and forth. Probably the tool of choice. You probably don't have one. A variable speed grinder. Now, you might have an angle grinder of some description, which is almost the right tool, but it's not. And the reason why is because those things spin at 10 or 20,000 RPM. Like it's a lot. They're super high speed. And a variable speed motor controller is expensive. It's not something that your grinder probably came with unless you got a really good grinder. If you have a variable speed grinder, an attachment like this is great. This is just a piece from a concrete step polishing kit that I bought a long time ago. And it's just the little Velcro pad. So that's 100 grit. And these are diamond. I mean, these are cheapies, so there's probably not a whole lot of diamonds in there. You can't use this on a full speed grinder because it's going to fly off and hurt somebody. If you can control the speed, you can go a lot slower and you can just do this very gentle grind. You're not going to be throwing grit and dust in the same way that any kind of high speed sander or grinder would do. So that's kind of my tool of choice is, set up like this on a variable speed grinder. But again, most people aren't going to have those. Even if you just had this part, I mean, actually that's definitely going to be one of the more effective things. And again, this is 100 grit. You could get 50 to be even more aggressive. And I think that would probably give you pretty satisfactory results in terms of minor shaping. And it's going to give you a pretty decent profile too, which is nice because you don't want it to be all gouged or scraped to heck. So it's nice to have a good finish on it. And I think that'd be one of the better options, even if you don't have the variable speed grinder. But if you're big into this stuff, totally get the variable speed grinder because then you can buy the step polishing kit. And it goes all the way from, I think, 50 to... is it 8,000? You can get almost a mirror polish on concrete, which is really cool. You couldn't do that yet. Like, let's say I wanted to do that right here, right now. I can't do it yet because this is too new still. This is only 5 days old or something like that. And to step polish, the concrete needs to be older and more cured and stronger, with the idea being that right now, if I tried to step sand this, the cement component is still weak. It hasn't achieved its finished strength. It will let go of the aggregate or the sand grains. Whereas I want to kind of shear the sand grains off by sanding them down. But instead, if the cement component just lets go of the sand grain, then now I have this pitted surface as opposed to a mere smooth surface. Totally different results. So if you're having trouble with a step sanding process, that could be the reason. You definitely just want to let it age fully, give it a full 30-day cure before you even think about doing a step sanding or step grinding process. Moving on. So I'm pretty happy with how this looks. I might clean up this edge a little bit, so I'll talk about these here. A couple of files, you know, these things aren't expensive. They last forever. This one almost has no purchase left at all because it's just ground smooth from being used for this application. This one here is still new and rough, and it will take off an aggressive amount. Like if I had a big lump of concrete and I want to take that off because, oh, it doesn't look good, I want to try to even this out, something like this would be a good tool. See, just very gently with this does a lot. So if I wanted to really like sand down a spot, this might be a good tool to do it. So all I'm doing here is I'm just kind of cleaning up this edge, right? When you work with concrete, however you left it, at the end of the day, is exactly how it looks now. And I mean like every trowel line, every visible imperfection, it's all exactly the way you left it. So you want to do what you can to try to minimize that. Let's move a little closer here. That's it, just run along the edge, very gently. Wear a mask. I'm not going to be doing much in the way here of sanding or grinding, so I'm not wearing one, but it kicks up a lot of dust. So if you're gonna do any kind of appreciable sanding or grinding, get geared up. This all looks good. Now here's a tip as well. So let's say, I don't even need to sand this at all. Like this is actually a really nice finish, but I can feel there's just a little bit of tack. Like concrete has this tack to it, this grab. Whereas if I take something like this is a very well-worn piece of 180 grit sandpaper, and just take it and kind of give it a once over, just a quick pass over the whole thing. Again, put on a mask. Don't be like me. Be better than me. So now it's different. Like, that tack that exists here, picture this. Picture you're trying to climb a perfectly flat and smooth wall. I can almost get a hold of it, but not here. It's too smooth there. So that's what you want to do. You want to get that nice smooth texture to the whole thing. So I'm not going to sand it all down now because, as I said, I want to be wearing a mask for that, but I do want you to know that process. Give it just a light sand the whole thing over. Okay, so now let's break it free from the base, and that's just as simple as hold on to the base and just give it a little shove. That's it. We're broken free. Not the lightest one. Well, we weren't going for light, I guess. So we still have the whole inside is filled with styrofoam, and we're gonna have to cut that out of there. It's gonna be a little bit of a monster of a job, but it's not that big of a deal to me. We'll get it out of there. One of these files is flat, and one of them is rounded. And it's because the rounded edge really helps you to get into some recesses that the flat blade can't get into. So it's not ready to paint yet. I want this to be fully cured before we try to paint it, so it's going to be another 3 weeks plus at this point. But it's definitely cured enough. I can probably cut out the center foam, probably on the inside. As you can see here, there's just like a little bit of honeycombing on the edging. I can see a little dot of steel there. I'm probably going to take the time to parge, and parge means to add another thin layer to an existing layer, and that will help me to clean up that inside detail. Like the whole inside probably has voids and air pockets in places where you can see the steel. So it's kind of expected with something like this that you'd have to take out your interior mold and then go in there with another mix and kind of fix it up. And let's just talk really quickly about that mix. If you're going to do that and you don't stick around and watch more videos, all you need to know is that when you do that, when you parge your new layer on, this existing layer has to be clean, it has to be damp, and the parge layer has to have a high cement ratio. So I'd probably do something like 1 part Portland cement, 1 part sand, mix those two together till they're like cake batter or slightly warm butter, and paste that on either with like a paintbrush or a trowel to clean, damp concrete. Let that set up for like a good little while, and then hit it with a damp sponge, and you're probably going to have a really good, clean, detailed finish with a high level of success that it's going to bond and stay together there. So that's what I'm going to be doing later. It's going to be a little bit of a process to take all this out. Maybe I'll get started on that now. I guess you want to see what's going on too, huh? It's like a treat when you get a chunk. So as you can see, it just pops right out of there. Do be careful when you're digging around in here. Can you see those nails sticking out? If you were around for the first video, you'll know that these are the pins that we use to hold the forms together. You certainly don't want to jam your hand into one of those. But it is worthwhile noting that we can reuse these. It is probably also worthwhile noting styrofoam lives second, third, fourth lives around here. This is already stuff that's just headed for landfill and that's been reclaimed. I use it for this mold here. It's a one-time use, and you're like, oh man, look at all this stuff. It was already headed for the garbage. So right away we're using it for something. Second of all, it's not done yet. There's more that we can do with this. That's why I'm collecting all this stuff. This gets used into lightweight concrete mixes. All of this little tiny polystyrene here is a great source of free aggregate to use in a lightweight concrete mix. Dig all this stuff out of here, and it's already chipped and broken apart. Throw it into a bucket and spin it with a drill and a paddle mixer at high speed, and you'll break it all down into something. This is perlite, but it looks something just like that there. Don't worry too much about generating waste. I feel more like I'm saving this waste and repurposing it for something like this, and then I'm going to repurpose it again after that into something else, and anything but just let it go into the garbage where it's headed anyway. I guess I could explain what I'm doing, maybe because you probably can't see very well. So all I'm done, I make a couple of deep cuts, being very careful when you're using a long X-Acto blade. If you're a novice, you can easily go to stab in and break this blade off under tension, send it flying at high speed, and that's no good. You got to be very careful. Wear glasses at all times. I should be wearing bigger glasses. Do as I say, not as I do. Do protect yourself. Use something like this, or maybe a fixed blade knife, and dig out the inside. So I cut an X, and then I cut a rectangle around that, leaving kind of like maybe 1 inch of foam at the sides all the way around. Once I get the inside layer dug out, in this case, this was a highly effective choice here, sharp end with an angle to it such that you can pry a little bit. I pried out the center until I reached the next layer of foam, and that's a clear delamination plane to take out one layer. So it kind of just go layer by layer is what I'm saying. Take out the middle section, dig it down so you expose the surface of the next layer of styrofoam, and then it's easier to get that outside ring out. I'm doing so by prying against the sides of your piece. You do want to be careful doing that. This is strong, and it's, like I said, a couple days past cured the point where I could have been in here doing this already, so it's actually really strong. And I'm familiar enough with this process to be able to tell by feel, oh, don't put that much strain. Like, I wouldn't stick a full-size crowbar in here and pry against this. You might be able to crack it. Maybe not. It's pretty strong. My point being is, if you're learning, be careful. You don't want to ruin your piece at this stage. That would just be the worst, right? You've put in so much time and effort to get here. You can pry against the edges, depending on how thick it is, depending on how cured the concrete is, but be careful. In my case, I'm able to do it. It's not really a problem. I'm able to get that last 1 inch of styrofoam out using something just like this, kind of run it on the edge, giving it a little twist and turn. There we go. And as soon as you expose one whole area, it all starts to kind of just come out a little bit easier. Again, I don't know how much you can see way down in there. You know, it's probably kind of hard to see, but Use your imagination. I'm tearing up the styrofoam. A chunk. More foam. Don't do that. I'm gonna leave that in as a lesson to you all. Try to avoid picking up a fully extended razor knife and throwing it at your torso. Remember, folks, I'm a professional. It's better than I thought. A little thin in this corner. If I'm being critical, I would have liked to seen that just a little bit thicker there. And I might be able to fix that up a little bit with a parge layer. Again, we talked about it just a minute ago. The inside of this form is expected to be pretty rough, and as you can see, it doesn't disappoint. Or it does disappoint. It doesn't disappoint to disappoint me. Moving along. Once we finish getting the styrofoam out, I'm gonna clean up this edge to whatever extent I can with a little bit of delicate grinding. You can fade these imperfections and make them less noticeable. They're still there, but they're less noticeable. So I'm going to minimize these, and then maybe with my parge layer I might be able to come out just a little bit thicker here and kind of fill that out. I've got a tiny little bit of steel. I don't want anybody to see that, so don't pay attention to this steel area here. But I'm going to see what I can do about that, because I can't have steel on the finished layer. I'm going to have to do something about that. You can't see it, and I can't lift this thing over to you to show you, but right here, right at the end of the knife, there's a tiny piece of galvanized steel. Right there. It's like a millimeter below the surface. And I'm going to put something like a red Robbie or a black Robbie screwdriver on that, and I'm just going to give it a tap with the hammer, and that's going to flatten that little piece of galvanized and maybe just push it in so it's 2 or 3 millimeters below the surface, and that would be good enough for me. When I parge the inside, I'm going to parge that little tiny bit right there. Right here to right here, I think has to go. I think I'm going to have to perform a little bit of surgery. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to use side cutters or tin snips if I can get in there enough with them. Probably side cutters to get to that. And I'll have to take out a little bit of this concrete surrounding this little piece of wire here, such that I can take out that wire, because I don't think I can press it in to get the coverage that I need, and I don't want to have wire exposed in the surface. So that's, I don't know, I guess it's good to show you the errors as well, because you're likely to encounter this stuff as well. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person that might have a little bit of steel showing through a form like this. I could leave it, but I don't want to. So before we're finished, we're going to address that. It's kind of the rule that I'm using for doing these videos. I want you to actually learn from this stuff. This isn't just another YouTube channel out there. I've made a lot of these, and I think I can help you to get better at doing it very quickly. And the only way for me to do that is to address the faults. I mean, if I don't address the faults, then how are you going to possibly learn? So even though it might, you know, I might not necessarily prefer to highlight all the ways in which I've made this imperfect, in doing so, I think that there is more to be learned. So let's continue along that vein. I'm going to keep going, hide my shame, and continue with removing the middle here. Should have built a smaller one. This thing's huge. But I kind of do that on purpose. Like, you want something bold, right? I don't want to build something that's worth $1. I want to build something that's got some value to it. And I like this. Like, oh, it's not even painted yet, and I like this already. The best part is you can do so much with the coloration. I haven't decided what I'm going to do for color on this yet. But there's a lot we could do, and it's funny because people always see these that I make at this stage, and they're like, I love it, I'll take it. It's not done yet. Let me finish it. It totally looks good, but once you see a finished, painted, sealed product, it's like, okay, that's way better. But yeah, it looks cool already, and I like it already. Let's keep going here. Down to the final layer. Be ready for it. The bottom layer is like a boss fight because there's no clean delamination to the next layer of foam, so it's really a lot more work than the other layers, but we're almost there. All right, 98% removed of the styrofoam inner core. It came out in 1 million pieces. Okay, so let's talk about what we're looking at here. So a few things. One, the rough porous surface to the presence of the pink styrofoam. So the pink styrofoam is high density insulation. It is different than the white polystyrene in that it is a closed cell product versus an open cell. Open cell means it absorbs moisture, closed cell means it will not. But when you cut it, you open the cellular structure. It's like this because of the extruding process. I could leave these. They're probably going to be okay because they're a high density insulation, but I don't think they look good. And I do think that it could fail in those areas because it would just have a skim coat over it. So at this point, all I'm going to do is take a trowel or something like that, and I'm going to dig all of those out of there, and I'm going to fill each of those pockets as I do this inside parge layer to give this a nicer finished detail and finished look to it. They were useful for their purpose in that they allowed the steel armature to not sit directly against the formwork. We want the steel a little bit into the concrete so that we can encapsulate the steel and get the benefits of the tensile strength increase. That's what the foam did, but it's not needed anymore. If you can, take it out. Why not take the extra time to take it out of there, and we'll patch those little areas. And that includes the one all the way down there at the bottom, which I placed there to allow for drainage to go through. So I'm going to pop that one out, and we're going to have a hole through the bottom of this planter. So what I need to do now, I need to drag the sucker outside, spray it down with a garden hose, maybe use a brush and kind of scrape as much of the styrofoam off of there as possible because it's kind of embedded into it a little bit. And once I've got it as clean as I can get it and fully saturated, then I can come back and I can apply that slurry layer that I was talking about earlier of 1 part cement, 1 part sand mixed to kind of a wet consistency like cake batter. And then we can spread that around in here with either a trowel or a paintbrush or something like that.